I hope you guys are all doing well, and welcome to the box office rundown for the weekend of August 25 to August 27, a weekend that will now go down in infamy for Hollywood, as this was one of the worst American box office weekends ever. And to be a little bit more specific, it is the worst American box office weekend in almost basically 20 years. I think around 16 years is what most people and sources are saying, that in 16 years this is the worst American box office weekend. The last time we had numbers this low was basically post 9/11, a time when there was literally a national disaster, and no one was going to see the movies at that time. And since then, this is our lowest weekend ever. This is actually very concerning. Perhaps you didn't know about this, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this is concerning, because this is actually really bad, not only for Hollywood studios, movie theater chains. It's just a really bad, messy situation. There are a lot of different causes that caused this disaster. So I'm going to start by talking about that and then kind of get into the stats about what went down this weekend. Causes are the Mayweather versus McGregor fight. A lot of people wanted to tune into that. It was pay-per-view. And some people were watching on YouTube, watching with friends, whatever. People stayed in home at Saturday night. And the second reason is the Hurricane Harvey, which hit Texas. So a lot of Texan theaters were closed, and even the ones that were open were not easily accessible because of the heavy weather or heavy rain. And the worst part is that even though these causes were big reasons for that, the worst part is that the most institution to blame is Hollywood itself. Because this weekend we saw only three wide releases. All three of which were destined to be doomed, basically. First one was the All Saints, which was a Christian faith-based film, which is of course a very niche market to begin with. So even though it was a wide release, it's a very niche market. Blumhouse Tilt did Birth of the Dragon, yeah. That was a martial arts kung fu movie. Terrible reviews, completely panned, and the movie just barely snuck into the top 10 with, I think, around, looking at the stats right now, $2 million. And then, of course, the quote-unquote big release of the weekend was Leap, Weinstein Company's film that was actually originally a European film. Just very third-class animated movie. That was one of the biggest wide releases. So let's get down to the top three to talk a little bit about these statistics. Overall, this weekend, Hollywood in the theaters made $63 million. Wow, it's very low, guys. To put it into perspective, I mean, we were making like $98 million or something just 1 week ago in the theaters, and Hollywood was making $98 million or so, and that was actually even also a slow weekend. But man, did things come to a crashing halt this weekend. Typically, going anywhere below 100 million is very, very low, and then for it to be basically just barely over 60 million, it was horrible numbers, horrible performance for all films across the board. Thank God for Ryan Reynolds and Samuel L. Jackson's The Hitman's Bodyguard. If that film were not around, basically Hollywood would be doomed this weekend. We would have numbers that were so low. And because $10 million of this weekend are from Hitman's Bodyguard. Without Hitman's Bodyguard, we would be in the $50 million. That is how much sometimes movies open, is $50 million. And I'm not even talking about the big budget ones. I mean, like, medium budget films sometimes open at $50 million. And that would be our total cume as a country. So that's really, really bad. Number three was Weinstein Company's Leap, one of the wide releases this weekend. Around $5 million. Terrible performance. But I don't think anyone was really expecting anything from it. In fact, for the creators of Leap, kind of a success, if anything, because that film was probably gonna be lost anyway and wasn't really directed toward American audiences. Weinstein Company threw it in, and so they made $5 million. Congratulations. Top three. Number three, a wide release at number three, not a good sign. Number two, we had Annabelle Creation, around $7 million. This film dropped 52.9% from its last weekend. Not a bad drop technically, and the film is trying to hold its own, but right now it's really dying off and people are not going into the theaters to see Annabelle Creation. That's a terrible drop, honestly, even though it's been in theaters for a somewhat somewhat long time. It really hasn't been that long. That film should have held on harder, and it just didn't. And it's pretty sad, even though, the Conjuring franchise in and of itself has now crossed 100 million. Good for them. But this weekend for Annabelle Creation, of course, as is with every film, was dismal. Again, 52.9% drop from last weekend. Okay, and Hitman's Bodyguard made around $10 million. Thank God for that film. With a 53% drop. Really bad. This movie's going to drop so hard next week. And I don't even want to talk about next week, because if you think this week was a disaster, I don't know what's happening next week, honestly. So as I said, $63 million total. Almost, I think every movie in the top 10 this weekend had a pretty big drop. Almost every movie dropped this weekend that was in the top 10. More than 40%. Spider-Man Homecoming did like a 32% drop, but let's be honest, Spider-Man Homecoming, very mid-sized hit at the box office, and, it's not really something that's commendable, honestly. At number 4, we saw Wind River, which was a Weinstein's Company film starring Jeremy Renner and Elizabeth Olsen. The film was in limited release past few weeks, came to wide release. Of course, there was a percentage up for that, 42.9% or so percentage upped. Theater count went up and everything, but I mean, even though it was getting all this critical acclaim, going from limited to wide, still number 4, so very, very dismal. If it made less than Leap, and I don't know the numbers for Wind River, but Leap made $5 million, so for Wind River to have made less than $5 million going limited to wide, it's really, really bad, guys. And, it sounds like I might be over-exaggerating, maybe because I'm a film buff, but I think anyone in the business world right now, in any business world, will tell you $63 million, in the movie business world, will tell you that $63 million is just pathetic for a weekend. It's just terrible, terrible, terrible news. Again, a lot of different causes, but I'd say the biggest institution to blame is Hollywood. They are not releasing movies. What can I say? I mean, it's been the last big release we got, if you can think of it, is Hitman's Bodyguard, and that movie was panned by critics. But thank God that it resonated with audiences. If that film didn't do well with audiences, we'd be totally just killed right now. The box office wouldn't even be a thing. So, I mean, and then Birth of the Dragon, that was a Blumhouse film and everything, only $2 million. That movie was critically panned and everything, and it's just a really dismal state. Theaters probably lost a ton of money. AMC is already complaining that, Baywatch flopped and King Arthur flopped, but this weekend was horrible for movies. Next week, I don't know. It might be even worse, because next week there's basically no wide releases. The only one is Alicia Vikander's and Dane DeHaan's Tulip Fever. And I mean, if that's the closest thing we have to a wide release, I don't even think that's going fully wide. I think that's semi-limited, actually. But if that's the closest thing we have to a wide release, and that's a very, very, very niche indie film, Dane DeHaan, I mean, come on, this movie can't make up money. So thankfully next weekend, I believe, is Labor Day weekend. So hopefully the long weekend is able to bring people in. So hopefully we get more people in the theater to watch at least Hitman's Bodyguard, or maybe Annabelle, I don't know. But right now it's really, really bad, guys. And just talking about, box office trend in general, I mean, personally, I found the summer 2017 to be one of my favorite summers for movies in terms of movies quality. But in terms of box office, guys, July was kind of a dull month, honestly. We had Valerian, and I'm going to talk about Valerian later, and Spider-Man Homecoming, which was one of the least grossing films of the Spider-Man franchise. Like everything, even Amazing Spider-Man films did better than Spider-Man Homecoming. So really, really dismal box office for July. The moment August started, I was hoping that, Dark Tower would somehow get good reviews. It didn't, so that already was just a thud. Thankfully, Annabelle Creation kept things a little bit revved up. Hitman's Bodyguard kept us alive. But now it's just sinking. There's no money in the Hollywood business right now. There's nothing coming out. Next weekend is so empty, guys. Like, there's not even like a remnant of a film coming out next weekend. It's literally going to be an unchanged landscape next weekend. So, I mean, I can already tell you my predictions. Hitman's Bodyguard will be number 1. Annabelle 2 will be number 2. I don't know where Tulip Fever will fit in. Honestly, it's not going to do that well. People are pinning hopes on that film, but it's really, that movie doesn't have anything to offer. Just hope and pray that movie makes it into the top 10 so we can get some more money in there. But this was a really, really bad weekend. I mean, it's the worst weekend box office for America in 2 decades, basically. That's really dismal. And it's really sad at the end of the day because, I'm always like, people should go see movies in theaters. That's the best way to experience films. But, I mean, people aren't going into theaters anymore, and partly because this is already a dry period, but, last year we had Don't Breathe, which kind of revved up August and kept it really going, and this year it just ended with such a thud and in such dull moments in August, and in an already dry period. It's really, really bad. I think everyone's hoping for it, obviously, to do well in September 8th so we can get some money into the box office again and get people into the theaters again. And I know that some places are releasing it in IMAX. Producers of it really, really, really should push it to be released in IMAX so we can get you can get some more money in there. And I mean, I think all producers should want it to get in IMAX. So and Theater Change should also play it in IMAX. One thing Theater Change did this weekend, brought a couple of the summer's hits back in theaters. Studios did that. Big Sick was back, Wonder Woman was back, Baby Driver was back. So pushing these films to come back in theaters. Next weekend we're also going to see Close Encounters of the Third Kind re-release. But the re-releases honestly aren't doing that well. Terminator 2 came back in theaters this weekend, not doing that well. Lion King came back, not really a big success. It's a pretty dismal state at the theaters right now. What I was going to say about Valerian, by the way, was that Valerian released in China, and thank God for that film and all of Europa that it is #1 at China. So it took down Wolf Warriors 2, which is one of the highest grossing Chinese films ever, and we have Valerian at the #1 spot. Hopefully that stays strong. It might, because I don't know about any other Chinese releases, but certainly American releases, there's not a lot coming for China. Or the Chinese market in terms of big releases. So yeah, overall very, very slow weekend, as I've already mentioned. But next weekend looks worse. So I mean, everything's on it now. Andy Muschietti is the director of that film. He directed Mama, which was kind of a semi-quasi well-received film. It's based off a Stephen King novel. The trailer was really hyped. There's a lot of hype around this movie. And I'm just hoping that the film does well. It also has the Stranger Things star Finn Wolfhard and all these people in it. So hopefully that movie does well. Kingsman's coming up, so I think September will be a much better month than August. Definitely, this has been one of the worst Augusts that I've seen for films in my life. It's really, really, really sad. And hopefully the box office gets better, because this was really a disaster. And it was really bad this weekend. So next weekend I'll try and do another one of these videos depending on how bad the damage is, because I know it's going to be pretty bad. So let's see what happens next weekend. But thank you guys for watching, and let me know in the comments down below. Did you go see a movie this weekend? It doesn't seem like you did, but if you did, let me know. Or if you wanted to go, let me know which one it was and what you think of this whole disaster debacle. Thank you for watching, guys. Really enjoy your support, and I'll see you next time.